Welcome to another Rubicon Crypto Kitchen Table Conversation. Today, our topic is crypto crime, fact versus fiction. And joining me as special guest, Michael Greenwald. Michael is a former U.S. Treasury official and a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. Michael, thanks for joining us and having a conversation about a topic that continues to dog the crypto industry.
Great to be with you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
I'd love to get your thoughts on what the fact versus fiction is. I know you've worked in this space before. I'd love to get your take on really what still persists in the industry with regard to crime and what should people know about versus maybe 5 or 10 years ago, the narrative back then.
Sure. So as you know, Greg, illicit actors, terrorist financiers, hackers, they're going to use a whole host of sources of financing, and they're going to always use different tactics for very common crime. And I think one of the things that is underreported is actually the low percentage of illicit finance in digital assets. That came to a head really when Russia invaded Ukraine, and the question came out saying, well, aren't digital assets going to be used by oligarchs to move money out of the country? And actually it wasn't. It was a very small amount, and firms like Chainalysis and Elliptic and TRM Labs, they have done great work to show that it's actually under 1% is actually illicit financing. Now, there are a lot of ransomware attacks, a lot of cyber attacks. A lot of those are because of human error and not using two authentication methods to protect your data and your security. So I think it's important to differentiate human error and what's actually happening in the digital asset marketplace. What I like to say is, if I'm a Russian oligarch, I have a better chance sending a Patek Philippe or a piece of art across border than a digital asset.
And that's because it's very traceable, isn't that true, Michael?
Very traceable, and the ledger is used by law enforcement very strategically, and it's been very effective. And I think TRM Labs have done great reporting about how post-ransomware attacks, the ledger has helped law enforcement not only clean up the digital assets, but recover the digital assets and look at that trail. And so the ledger is a great tool for law enforcement.
I think I've heard you say before that maybe 10 years ago or many years ago, it might have been true to say that crypto and digital assets, it may have been largely the domain of these bad actors, these criminals, these drug dealers, the so-called Silk Road and so forth. But I think I heard you say that's changed and the technology has gotten better to track down some of these bad folks.
I think there's a lack of information, Greg, and a lot of, I would say, lack of intelligence. So, figures that said a large portion was being used by illicit actors, Al-Qaeda or ISIS, for digital assets, I don't believe, was truly accurate or known. I think that you look at the money trails, you look at what's been moving, I think it's important to note that there will be wallet addresses that will be sanctionable. There will be actions taken by OFAC and the US government to shut down certain wallets, but it's whack-a-mole. They'll pop back up and it's going to be a continued form, just like illicit actors. We have to keep ahead of these actors.
So I think what I'm hearing from you is if you're an illicit actor, cash is still king these days. Isn't that true?
Cash is still a key form, and not just the US dollar, but euros and other forms of currency. But when you use cash, there's also vulnerabilities. And how do you move a lot, whether it's gold, easable? So I think the goal is to make it as difficult for illicit actors to operate and to shut any backdoors in any evasion sanctions tactics for illicit actors or major countries like Iran or North Korea or others that use this as a fundraising vehicle.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your perspective on Rubicon Crypto Kitchen Table Talk. Thank you.
My pleasure.